Hey everyone, how are you guys doing today? Oh, it was sunny and now it's raining. But Timmy and I are sitting here in the car waiting for Nate because he's at a doctor's appointment. And I thought I'd just share with you a little bit of his testimony, of his story of why he is our miracle baby. Um, Timothy was born at 7 months premature. He was 3 pounds and 10 ounces and he was 17 and a half inches long. I remember that. And he was born on a Friday night at 8:08 p.m. Timothy had a dry birth when he was born, so I could not push him out. He had to come out on his own. And in doing that, the umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck. Timothy was not alive when he was born. The doctor actually caught him because he slid right out and caught him, and then they performed CPR and brought him back to life. Timothy was in the hospital for 6 weeks, and then he was able to come home. And when we were getting ready to bring him home, that's when we knew at that moment that Timothy was deaf. We didn't know how deaf he was, but they did say, oh, he's either deaf or hard of hearing because he failed the bear test 3 times. And that's the test that they give all newborns before they go home. So we said, okay, that's fine. So we ended up taking him home. We had a homecoming party for him in April when he got to come home. And everything seemed to be going fine. He was just low birth weight and he was deaf. Around 4th of July, we noticed that he wasn't feeling well. And so we took him into the doctor, and the doctor said, oh, Timmy has the flu. So they admitted him because he was still little and he was a preemie when he was born. And then we ended up finding out that he ended up having pneumonia. So they transferred us to Children's Hospital, Central California, which was then called Valley Children's Hospital in the Madera, Fresno area. So we get there and they keep us there for a couple of days. They give Timmy antibiotics. Everything's fine. He gets better. We come home and we're home one day, and the doctor's office calls and just asks how he's doing. They want to make sure that he's okay because, something in their mind and their heart was saying, we need to call this family. Well, while Stephen was on the phone with the doctor's office, I was changing Timmy's diaper, and I noticed his diaper a little pink. And I was like, whoa, this is weird. And so I told Stephen, hey, let them know that Timmy has a little bit of blood in his urine. And they said, what? And I said, yeah, Timothy has a little blood in his urine. So they said, okay, you guys need to come back. We need to run some more tests on him. And we said, okay. So we packed him up. We left the kids with my mom because my mom was living with us at the time. So we left Avery and Noah with my mom. And we packed a bag and we took off to Fresno, which was about an hour and 10 minutes from where we lived. So we get there and they're like, hey guys, welcome back. And, just joking around. And they wanted to run tests just to make sure everything's okay. So we're getting ready for bed that night, and Timothy's all hooked up to the machines. They're trying to figure out what's going on. They did notice that he still had a little bit of phlegm in his lungs, and they were just gonna run tests on him to make sure everything's okay. So we're getting ready for bed. I take my contacts off. Steven's laying down, and we're right across from the nurse's station. And so they're like, you guys going to bed? We said, yeah. Turn the lights off. And all of a sudden, I hear gurgling. I'm like, what the heck is going on? Turn the light on, and Timothy had blood coming out of his nose, out of his mouth, out of his ears, in his eyes that looked like tears. He was literally crying blood. So I'm like, oh my gosh, Timothy's bleeding. And my husband goes and calls the nurses, and they automatically get us up, shoo us out of the room, and they call a code blue. Timothy was choking and dying on his own blood. So they push us out, and we're sitting there waiting, and I could hear over the loudspeaker, loud and clear, code blue, code blue. And you just see all these doctors and nurses running. And my little baby boy is only 5 pounds. 5 pounds. And all these doctors are working on him. And then I want to say, it felt like forever, but I want to say it was at least 2-3 minutes. And they come and they say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional. We've revived your son. He's going up to the ICU. And we said, okay, where do we go? And at this time, my husband has already called his parents. He has everybody praying for us and everything, and praying for Timmy. And so we go upstairs and we go to the ICU room that he's at. And he's in this like little incubator And he has like this helmet on because he's so small that they couldn't intubate him, that they have this like little, it looks like a little astronaut helmet over his head. And he has that, he has the tube around his nose and all this, he's hooked up to all these machines. And they're like, we don't know where the blood's coming from, so we're going to run all these tests, and we're going to have your son sedated while we do this. And we're like, okay. And so at that time, we were able to have family come over and see him. And, we ended up dedicating him in the hospital because we didn't know what was going to happen. And then we have all these doctors and specialists coming. No one can figure out where this blood is coming from. No one knows. Every doctor. I mean, he even had an oncologist because they thought he had a blood clotting disorder. And so, and they did notice that he had his blood was a different color than everyone else's. So they gave him a little bit of a blood thinner. But he was getting the all clear. The doctors were like, okay, we don't know where this is coming from. Maybe it was like a freak accident or something. And so we're like, okay, so we're getting ready to go home. This is July 30th, my brother's birthday. Steven took off back down to Delano where we lived to go pick up Avery and Noah because we were excited that we were all going to go home. Timmy gets to go home. And I remember I'm sitting there with my husband's cousin, Lucy. She came over to see how Timmy's doing. She didn't know we were leaving that day. And we were just talking, having a conversation, playing with Timmy, getting him changed and everything. And then the cardiologist comes in. It's like, hey, Mrs. Rojas, I just want to do one more echo on Timmy's little heart because I want to make sure everything's okay. We give him the all clear. He's like, it'll put my mind at ease. And I said, sure, no problem. So he comes in, he does an echo, and then he goes, And I said, yeah. He's like, I'm not liking the way this looks. And at that same time, my husband starts walking up with the kids. So Lucy takes the two kids, Avery and Noah, back down to the waiting room, and Steven walks in, and we're standing there, and he's like, I noticed Timmy has a thrombus on his heart, and I would like to repair that just in case that was what caused the bleeding. And I was like, oh, okay. And then he was like, we don't know the extent of it. All I know is that we need to get this done as soon as possible. And that we were just like, okay, well, let's get this done as soon as possible. I'm crying. I'm a mess because I wanted to go home. I didn't want to be in the hospital any longer. And then my husband calls his parents and calls my aunt and my mom. And they all start rushing up to come and see Timmy because, he was so small. The doctor gave us pros and cons of him having a surgery at that age. And they had to go through his chest. They weren't able to go through the side. So we're like, okay. So we're waiting. They give us a special little room. We're waiting in this room for the doctor to give us updates. And for some reason, the surgery started taking longer than usual. And we're like, what is going on? So we get a little update from the nurse, and she's like, everything's going good. The doctor has some concerns, but he'll come in to talk to you soon. So we're like, okay. So Dr. Willard comes in and tells us, this is Dr. Roberto, which was another doctor, a pulmonologist. He's assisting me on Timmy's procedure. And I was like, okay, why is a pulmonologist assisting on my son's procedure? So while Dr. Roulard, the cardiologist, was fixing the thrombus in Timmy's heart, he noticed that Timothy's left lung was not functioning. So he called in Dr. Roberto, who was a specialist, a pulmonologist specialist, the best that was there at the time, and wanted his opinion on what was going on with Timothy. So they both ended up noticing that Timothy's left lung, lower part of his right lung, and the bottom part of his heart all had some type of bacterial fungal infection on it. So they were concerned. And then Dr. Roberto was like, Timothy's left lung is not working. He said it dried up like a prune. So Timothy ended up contracting a vegetation called Candida it's only found in women. I was tested. I didn't have it. We don't know where it came from. We don't know if it came from someone being dirty, not cleaning. Could have been anywhere from the time that he was born to when we got there at the hospital. But anyway, so they ended up removing Timothy's left lung, the part of his right lung and was able to scrape everything off his heart. So they do that. And then they said, Timothy's going to look a little different than you're used to. And I was like, okay. They had to leave Timothy's chest open, and it was covered with bandages, but it was open because the infection needed air to dry it out. And so we're like, okay. But through all this, we were all like worried and not knowing what's going to happen. And we were told that Timothy had a 10% chance of living through this surgery. 10% chance of living. They were telling us, say your goodbyes, start getting arrangements together. And this is like the third time, because Timothy was born dead. First time he was born dead. Second time he coded when he was upstairs at the hospital, at Children's Hospital. And now this time they're saying, say your goodbyes because you may not see your son again. Okay. Another, like, what are we going to do? We're an hour away from home, all this stuff. Timothy ended up coming out of the surgery, like I said, with his chest open. He had his chest open for a week. Within that week, he was trying to roll over. So they were like, we're going to have to close his chest up early. This little boy's active. And the doctors would come in all the time and talk to us and say, let us know about Timothy and how he's doing and everything. And one doctor, she came and she's like, I've never seen a case like your son's. I've never, ever in my whole career have seen anything like this. She goes, and I have decided to retire after your son is discharged from this hospital. I need to spend more time with my children. And we're like, what? She's like, your son gave me this inspiration, like, I need to be with my kids because you just never know. And I was like, okay, And so after that surgery, everything seemed to be going good. Everything was going good. We were going to get ready to go home again. And we were all excited for that again. So Timothy gets better, drops us down to a regular room. No more ICU for Timothy. And then when we're getting ready to go home again, so I know how I told you about the blood thinners and stuff. So Timothy was put back on blood thinners because of the vegetation that they found in his lung. They wanted to make sure that it didn't spread. So they were putting blood thinners through him to make sure that it didn't spread. And what happened was it thinned his blood so much that they had an IV in his neck, and the IV in his neck popped, and the blood was just coming out the side of his neck. So this is like, we're getting ready to go home, and then we go, we went to go eat, come back, and there's a nurse standing there holding my son's neck. And I'm like, what the heck's going on? Well, Timothy started to bleed out on his neck. So I ended up stepping in and putting my hand there while the nurse goes and grabs some blood transfusions and stuff. And Timothy's had quite a bit of blood transfusions. And so they're telling us again, hey, say your goodbyes. We don't know what's going to happen. We can't get this to stop bleeding. So again, we call my father-in-law and stuff, and they start this prayer chain, and we're all just praying and praying, like, Lord, if it's his time, he's going to go. If not, use him as a tool for a miracle, for your glory. And I want to say 45 minutes went by, and then all of a sudden it just stopped. It stopped bleeding. And at this time, I'm already, I'm exhausted. My two older kids have not seen us in months. And I'm at the point where, what do I do? And I felt so bad, and I prayed about it. It's like, I need to go home. I need to go home. And my husband was already starting work in Fresno. We decided to move up that way. He started work. And just as I said, I want to go home, we found out that we were able to get an apartment at the complex that my husband was working at, which is about 20 minutes away from the hospital, which is a lot closer than the whole hour and 10 minutes away. So I go home that weekend, and I start packing everything up, and my husband stays with Timmy, pack everything up. And then that Sunday he comes down, and we move everything within a weekend up to Fresno. And then the doctor, it's already September, and the doctor's like, I'm not going to tell you you guys are getting to go home, because every time I tell you you guys get to go home, you guys never get to go home. So she goes, you guys aren't going home tomorrow. And we're like, what? She's like, you're not going home tomorrow. So this was September 18th. So that means we got to go home on the 19th. So we're like, oh, okay. You know, I didn't think about it at first. And then I was like, wait, why is she moving her head like that? And so the next day we go to visit Timmy, and everything's ready to go. Everything's packed up, ready to go. We had to take a class for CPR for Timmy, and Timothy was coming home on a breathing with oxygen. He was coming home with a feeding tube, and he was coming home with a Broviac in his heart to help with the blood thinners, to help the clotting and stuff. So we had to take classes on all that, and we did. You know, we got home, and I want to say within 3 to 4 days, Timmy pulled out his feeding tube, and so I had to teach him how to eat, because Timothy was intubated so long that the top of his mouth was shaped a certain way that he couldn't drink out of a bottle. And so he would use these special nuke nipples, and that's the only way he could eat. And we found out that Timothy's esophagus is open more than anybody else's, so that's why he has a lot of gas and he burps a lot. And he's always making like burping noises. And that's because of being intubated, because he was so small, they didn't have small enough tubes. You know, they had to, his esophagus was stretched a little. So we bring him home. He's on this, you know, on this, all these machines and stuff. And I want to say by the time his first birthday rolled around, he was no longer on machines. But throughout this time, we were finding out little by little that Timothy was born without a soft spot, so he has craniosynostosis, and he has enlarged ventricles in his brain, which is a hydrocephalus, and that is because of the lack of oxygen to his brain when he had his when he coded. We also found out that Timothy has cerebral palsy, and that is also due to lack of oxygen to his brain. But he has spastic dysplasia, cerebral palsy, so it only affects his extremities, his arms and his legs. We also did find out that Timothy is intellectually delayed. So Timothy is 21 years old, but has the mind of a 3-year-old. So he's constantly arguing and playing and fighting with his niece, my granddaughter, who is 3. Timothy was also diagnosed with autism, and it was called infantile autism, and that's why he's mentally only 3 years old, because it affects him makes him feel like he's an infant toddler. Timothy also has febrile seizures, so when he gets too hot, he'll have a seizure, which thank God he hasn't had any in a while. Moving here to Oregon, it doesn't get as hot as it does in California, so that's a plus. So there, you know, Timothy has, we call him our little concoction of diagnoses. So, yeah. But that's a little bit about Timothy's life. Also too, like, when they told us that Timothy had a 10% chance of living, we were also told that Timothy would never walk. Timothy would never eat. Timothy would never be potty trained. Timothy got potty trained at the age of 7. Timothy learned how to walk at the age of 7. Timothy learned to eat at the age of 7. 7, you guys. 7 for everything. Now we can't get this boy to stop eating. He eats all the time. He loves hamburgers. He loves going to Taco Bell. His favorite is Burger King and McDonald's. He's a huge Applebee's fan. You know, this kid loves to eat, and he loves sweet tea. But and it all was thanks to his teacher, Miss Vicky. She's like, no, we're not doing diapers, we're not doing bottles. We're gonna work with him, and we're gonna get him some therapy, and we're gonna work with him. So she did that on her own, because he was going to occupational therapy and physical therapy, and she did. She potty trained him, and she got him to eat, you know, and she taught him how to walk, because he used to use a walker because his legs were just so weak and so small. He doesn't use a walker anymore, but he does have a limp when he walks. So he, you know, one leg is longer than the other. One side of his body is longer than the other, and that's just because he's missing that lung. So everything shifted to this side. And we also found out at that time too that Timothy is profoundly deaf. There's no hearing whatsoever. The tests show that Timothy has everything in place everything's there, but there's just no connection from the eardrum to the brain. So that's why he doesn't wear hearing aids. He doesn't use any assisted devices or anything, because he doesn't need them. There's no use for them. We were trying to get him on the to get a cochlear implant, but there was no use for it. It's best served to someone else that could use it, because it would be a disservice for Timothy. So yeah. Timothy, when he learned to eat at 7 years old, everybody asked, well, what did he eat before then? So we used to get Pediasure for Timothy. We used to get it by the cases. He would drink like 12 cans a day, and that's all he would eat. That's probably why he's so strong. He learned to eat. His first food that he ate was ice cream. And oh my gosh, we were so excited. Now with the potty training, Timothy was potty trained, but because of his cerebral palsy, we knew that there would be some setbacks. And since I want to say the past year, Timothy has regressed and he is back in briefs, but we are working with him to see if we can help with that incontinence. But Timothy this past year has had a pretty rough year due to, with COVID and everything. He didn't catch COVID or anything, but due to all the sicknesses going around and COVID and the fires, Timmy, we had a lot of fires here. Timmy had a setback and he was put on a nebulizer because his one lung is not functioning at the capacity that it should be. And so it's making him angry more, and he's having trouble breathing and stuff. So, we're getting that situated and everything. And he's just, a miracle. He shouldn't be sitting here. He should not be sitting here. But by the grace of God and our faith in God, Timothy is here today. He's 21 years old today. And he's our miracle. So that's a little bit about Timmy's story. If you want to know more, shoot me a message and I'll let you know. But as of today, say happy birthday to Timmy. And again, have a blessed day.